discussion items. Most of the things we have are discussion items, so we probably should proceed with that. So let me call the meeting to order. Turn my little recorder on. To introduce myself, I'm Bill Johnson. You have honored me to be chair of this group. Going around the room to my left, would you introduce yourself and tell us where you are from, who you're representing?
Kelly Miller, representing Commissioner Catherine Starkey, Pasco County.
Bob Widmeyer, Hernando County, at-large, appointed by Cliff Manuel from the board.
Karen Mullins, Pinellas MPO.
Rick Richmond, Hillsborough County NPO.
Bill Roberts at large, appointed by Melanie Griffin.
Bob Henyon at large, appointed by Jim Holton.
And our guests, would you introduce yourselves as well?
Sure. Kelda Senior, Florida's Turnpike Enterprise with the SunTracks Project.
I'm Donna, I'm Bob's wife. And chauffeur for right now.
Welcome.
Dave Sobush with the Tampa Bay Partnership.
Chris Janet, Director of Communications for TBARTA.
Brian Passaro, Principal Planner with TBARTA.
Chris DeNuntis, Senior Planner with TBARTA.
Okay. And on the phone, Leo Dorset, Hoyt, and Michael. Is there any public comment? No public comment? I do want to highlight a couple things on the agenda. Down under item 6, I've added 6C to talk about flamingo passes and the transit user experience. Also, I wanted to highlight under 7, new business and committee discussion. I'd like to just take a few minutes for us to brainstorm as to how we could be more effective for assisting the board. And so as we go through the meeting, if you want to jot down something to bring up at that time, we will. Consent agenda items, we really can't adopt them, but are there any corrections to the minutes if you noted any errors in it?
I did not.
Okay. Moving on to presentations. We have a presentation on the SunTracks project update from Kelda. Right?
Yes.
Kelda Senior, who is from the Florida Turnpike Enterprise. Michael, do you want to do any introduction, or shall we just dive right in?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we could probably dive right into this one.
It's already loaded.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, good afternoon. As Bob mentioned, my name is Kelda Senior. I am with the Florida's Turnpike Enterprise, and my role with the SunTracks project is Business Development Manager. So what that means is my primary responsibility is to establish connections with future SunTracks customers and users and help foster those relationships so by the time the facility is completely built out and opened in 2021, we'll have a steady flow of users and customers. So I'll just go through this update and happy to take any questions afterwards. So we've been starting off recently sort of highlighting the mission and the vision. We sometimes are getting questions lately asking if SunTracks is a public-private partnership between the state and any private sector entities, and it's not. This facility, as you all know, is completely funded and managed by the Turnpike. So we zero in on that mission and that vision to help our audiences and community members understand that this facility is really being built to help push future transportation technologies to make roadways safer. And we want SunTracks to have a national and international appeal and draw. So this is the facility facility, we own 475 acres total in Auburndale. 400 of those acres are currently under construction or under development. Everything you see in the white, which is the oval track, that was all completed this past May. The track is 2¼ miles, 5 lanes wide. It can be operated 7 lanes wide if needed, through the shoulders. We have 4 tolling gantries. The track is primarily going to be used by the Turnpike's tolling department for their software upgrades and technology advancements. And everything you see in the purple is phase 2. Design for that was completed this past July. We will let the contract in a couple of weeks to get a contractor on board, and then we'll start construction on the infield, everything in the purple, and probably around October. Some of the feedback that we've been getting in terms of location is that it's ideal. Several weeks ago, there was the Autonomous Vehicle Symposium held in Orlando, typically held in San Francisco, but Orlando was able to draw this large conference in Central Florida. We had a steady flow of meetings and visits at the track from potential customers, and the piece of feedback that we've been getting is the location is ideal because we're 45 minutes from both major metropolitan cities. So that's a huge draw as we're talking to companies who are thinking about sending engineering teams down for a season to do some testing. They can easily access both major cities of Tampa and Orlando. Of course, we're right off of I-4 and the Polk Parkway, so logistically it's easy to get to the facility. And in a couple of years, we'll also be building a new interchange right around the track off of the Polk Parkway, which will further help accessibility. So phase 1, as I mentioned, all of this was completed this past May. The buildings that you see were also recently completed, and those buildings, again, will primarily be used by the Turnpike's tolling department. That's how SunTracks really began. It began from the Turnpike's need to test its software upgrades and run new tolling scenarios and challenges. Before we built the track, we would use a portion of the Polk Parkway. I think several years before, they owned a track out in another part of Central Florida that they would do test runs. That property needed to be used by another DOT district, so the Turnpike said, hey, let's just build our own track, and this is what they came up with. It was 2¼ miles for the purpose of being able to test tractor trailers, so they can easily make those turnarounds on those loops. Those turnarounds are actually huge, so they made the turnarounds big enough for tractor trailers to make turns, and you can do tandem truck testing as well. So that's phase 1 is what we're calling it, and these photos of what you see, these were taken this past May or June, so these are pretty recent. Phase 2 is the infield. So this is everything that we're going to start construction on in October. This is probably the 4th or 5th version of this design, so if you've seen this presentation a couple of times, you've seen it morph over the years. This is the latest and greatest. After a lot of feedback from industry leaders, academia, potential customers, tier 1 suppliers, auto manufacturers, this is what they said that they needed. This is the facility where we're able to offer services that maybe other test tracks and proving grounds do not offer. And these different environments are going to be what we build. We'll go through a video real quick to kind of highlight some of the key features. But one of the main things you'll notice as we go through that are these design principles of being varied environments, diverse scenarios, and highly reconfigurable. One piece of insight that the team received during its outreach, particularly more so in Michigan, was that test track built a lot of permanent structures in the ground. And that makes it very difficult to accommodate various users and change up environments very easily. So you'll notice we won't have a lot of buildings, we won't have a lot of structures in the ground. We're going to use shipping containers and things on wheels to keep things very mobile and accessible for various users. So we'll go through this video, and this video will highlight the key features of the infield. So this shows the entranceway into the future infield. That archway that you see, that was already built out in phase 1, so that's actually complete. Everything you see now is what we will build beginning in October. So this, what the camera is showing now, is the future Welcome Center or Arrival building. This will be about 20,000 square feet of office spaces, classroom spaces for our partners at Florida Poly, which of course is right down the street. We'll have indoor and outdoor event spaces. This is also where any engineering teams, management teams, business development or marketing staff, they'll all be housed here in this future Welcome Center. That Welcome Center is also where folks will get credentialed. So if you do not have the proper access badges to get any further, you will not be allowed to get any further beyond that point. This is a highly secure facility for private testing for customers who want secrecy for their intellectual property. So we're gonna offer that here. Here's an example of one of the inside of one of the garage and warehouse bays. This will be total about 56,000 square feet. Each of these bays, as you can see, have different garages and different access points and gates. Those gates will allow the right users in and keep anyone who does not have access in, keep those out. And again, that's for privacy reasons as well. Some noise, harshness, and vibration testing. A lot of these autonomous and connected vehicles are full of cameras and sensors hanging off of them, and they'll have to go through the same rigors as traditional vehicles will have to go through. So we're gonna offer that here at SunTrax. Again, another traditional vehicle type of scenario, braking demonstration being performed here. Cameras and sensors have to go through those same rigors, so we'll offer some of that as well. This is one of the 2 loop tracks, and these loop tracks will primarily be used by customers who want to simulate entrance points and exit points off of ramps. And as the camera spans over, this is a really cool feature. This will allow users to do augmented reality. So these buildings and all of these features are not really there. It's just to show you that users can come and they can do what's called vehicle in the loop testing, where they can pump signals in their vehicles so their vehicle is behaving like it's in the middle of Times Square or San Francisco, when in reality it's in the middle of Polk County. So that'll be a pretty cool feature. This observation tower will not be this elaborate. We've had to scale back a couple of things due to cost, but we will have an elevated platform for users to see their tests. This will probably be about 60 feet high, but it just won't be that fancy. Also related to cost, this will be pushed back to phase 3. So phase 3 for us will be probably about 2024, 2025. And this is a chamber where we're gonna attempt to control the weather. We'll be able to do rain, lightning, dust, fog, everything but snow. That would be literally impossible to try and recreate in Florida, or very expensive. So we'll allow the test track in Michigan to take those customers. But everything else we can handle here in Florida with that weather chamber in phase 3. Another popular feature will be this pickup and drop-off area. Of course, we cannot go and shut down Orlando or Tampa's airports, but we can recreate those type of scenarios right here at SunTrax. As we enter into this urban environment, you'll start to notice the shipping containers. That goes back to that design principle of being highly reconfigurable, not building too many permanent structures in the ground to make it difficult for other users to come. So this is where we're going to simulate city-like environments. So we've had interest from bus transit companies who want to use this area for some simulation and some tests. Here's an example of a test vehicle navigating the urban environment. It's taking in all the information around it and hopefully navigating appropriately. We will have a couple of structures in the ground, like these light poles and some of the signage, but everything else will primarily be shipping containers. And you can kind of see how an environment can easily be changed by stacking those shipping containers up to probably about 60 or 70 feet high. This sensor loss chamber that got axed, this would have been about a $9 million structure just to block out GPS signals. And we can save money and use shipping containers instead, so we actually cut that out. Some truck platooning happening on the high-speed oval here. We'll actually have a lot of users from the logistics and trucking space come and use the track as well. So that'll be an exciting customer to come out, probably first out of the gate. And then this is an example of a different topography, different elevations, so users can test their vehicles with different hills and different slopes. So that is everything we're going to build for phase 2. So the Turnpike recognizes that this is a little bit outside of our scope. We know how to build roads and maintain roads and collect tolls. We do all those things very well, but we know that managing an autonomous vehicle test facility is different for us. So we're going to hire some pros. We're going to hire an operator firm to manage the daily business of SunTrax, including some marketing and outreach and also the maintenance and security of the facility. They'll also offer these different suites of services. So depending on what a customer or a user wants, they can come to us and get that information, and we can provide the services based upon what they need, whether they're a small startup tech firm or a larger OEM will be able to provide whatever they need. We're gonna hopefully advertise this interest to negotiate contracts in a couple of months, and it'll go through the same process as any other DOT procurement. Nothing different about that too much. And then after negotiations, we'll hopefully have this firm on board sometime next spring. And I added this here just to sort of give the group an update on sort of the CAV connected and autonomous vehicle legislation happening around the state. As you may have heard, the governor has actually been out to Suntrax twice, once at the top of the year and then again in June to sign House Bill 311, which further broadens Florida's laws to allow autonomous vehicles on public roadways just as long as the vehicle can stop itself in the event of an emergency. So I'm sure you may have heard Starsky Robotics. They've done a lot of work on the Selman, but they also more recently did a completely unmanned truck run, 10 miles, no driver in the cab, completely autonomous. And this was in June, I believe. So it's already happening, but Suntrax is going to be built because this technology continues to have to mature, it's continuing to advance. But this type of legislation just makes it a very welcoming environment for these tech firms and these major auto manufacturers to come and do business in Florida. Project timeline, as I mentioned, we will begin construction on the infields, everything in the inside of the oval. We'll start construction on that in October. We'll do it all in different phases, but we'll open everything up for completion in late 2021. The oval track is opened for business. We're already going to have some users probably as soon as this fall using the track, and then in late 2021 we'll have the other users for the infield once that's built out. So with that, I hope I didn't go over. I'm happy to take any questions or thoughts.
Karen?
I've got a few questions. The first is, I'm not seeing any alternatives to power, like solar or wind or anything like that in any of the descriptions that you come on. Is that something that Suntrax is considering?
So we will focus more on electric vehicles. So in addition to connected and autonomous vehicles, absolutely electric vehicle testing, particularly electric bus transit testing is going to be done here at the track. We're not broadening our scope too much beyond vehicles and ground transportation because this is the DOT and the primary focus is on making roadways safer. So that's going to be the primary use.
I understand that. However, I really would like to see Suntrax utilize solar or wind power on the property to negate some of the costs and some of the fossil fuel uses that the current power companies are using.
Absolutely. And another point is all the facilities that are being built are going to be LEED certified, so that'll be another feature. The buildings that you saw, those have been built LEED certified silver, I think.
Okay,
so
good.
That's another component that I didn't mention.
Okay.
Yes.
And the other things, are you storing fossil fuels on the premises?
No, we'll have fueling stations and electric vehicle charging stations. On the premises.
So there will be fueling stations, which is fossil fuels
for the vehicles.
For the vehicles, that's what I'm asking. And who's going to be taking care of that? Is that going to be outsourced or?
That's going to be through the operator firm.
Okay. One more thing about the buildings inside. Is there going to be a plan, like this building's going to look this way versus all of them being the same? Or are you going to let each individual company decide what's being built in that area?
So everything that you see in the middle, it's completely designed and we're starting construction in October. So there's not going to be much change there. But really the only building is going to be that Welcome Center. Everything else, we won't really have any other buildings beside that Welcome Center. Everything else is really going to be shipping containers.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Couple of questions. Is this supposed to be a cost center or does it have to generate its own revenue stream?
It will generate its own revenue stream. So the business model is users will come and they will rent the space and the time for their track time, their sector environment time, and storage and office space time. So that revenue will come back to the state. A portion will go to the operator for their work in managing the facility, and then the other portion will go back to the state for future maintenance and future expansion.
Okay, second question. Is the only way in by basically highway, or are you envisioning maybe a virgin train station just above up by 4, and possibly then, what, a railroad?
Yes, those
I mean,
opportunities.
not railroad, plane.
Version, yeah, so those opportunities could certainly develop over time.
But they're not planned yet.
We're a long way from any of that. Yeah, we're certainly a long way from any of that.
Thanks for tying in transit. Well done.
Yes, yes, I saw what you did there. I like it.
Transit.
I like it.
Well, so you have more space outside of that oval, is that
Right.
correct?
That's correct. We own an additional 75 acres on the other end of the oval. There is additional property around. Of course, the property has skyrocketed in the past couple of years, so it's a lot more expensive than what we were able to first acquire any property for. But we are looking at acquiring different property around the existing track. We just got to come up with the funding for that.
Anybody over here? Anybody on the phone with questions?
This is Hoyt on the phone. So I think someone asked this earlier, but it was a little scratchy on the phone. So this facility only deals with automobiles or functions thereof. It's not dealing with any other kind of futuristic transportation needs outside of the automobile. Is that correct?
Yes. So, well, I wouldn't say automobiles. I would say ground transportation. So, in addition to traditional vehicles, we'll also have electric vehicles and transit users. Again, trucking will be probably our first user. We'll also have those little unmanned shuttles that hold about 8 to 12 people. You may have seen those around. We'll have that kind of testing as well. So it's beyond just the personally owned sort of vehicle. It's everything sort of ground transportation. Eventually, after phase 2 ramps up and we start to see a steady flow of customers, there are talks about getting the airspace regulation so we can do potentially some drone testing in the future. But the primary focus right now is going to be ground transportation.
So no rail or anything like that. That's correct.
We don't have necessarily the space to test rail inside of the facility. So when we talk about transit, it'll definitely be buses, electric buses, connected and autonomous vehicle buses that will do testing at the track when we talk about multimodal.
Well, if it's a space issue, does that mean that the Turnpike Enterprise envisions rail at some point? I mean, I hate to be redundant here, but I guess what I'm trying to decipher is the mission statement says, to advance technology solutions which improve the safety and efficiency of transportation. And so I'm just trying to hone on what seems to me it's just kind of solely related to automobiles or its variants.
Absolutely. So yes, those opportunities could present themselves in the future. I think when we talk about the governor and the secretary and their primary objectives right now, it's the fact that 40,000 folks died in car accidents last year. So they're really zeroing in on the fact that our state's population is continuing to increase. We love our cars, and yes, we do realize that there's going to be a mind shift that's going to have to take place to embrace transit to a degree, but that primary focus is going to be on vehicles because that's where most of the vehicular crashes are occurring. That's where most of the deaths are occurring on our roadways, is our car crashes and pedestrian crashes.
Well, you bring up pedestrians. What part of this project will include improving pedestrian safety and its interaction with the automobile?
So that'll definitely be primarily the urban or the city environment. So that the movie that kind of highlighted there was that dummy on wheels that the car was navigating in that space. Yeah, the city and the urban environment will definitely be the primary focus for pedestrian scenario recreation.
Anything else, Hoyt?
No, I'll leave my questioning to that. Thank you, Bill.
Okay, Bill?
Thank you. Kelda, thanks for coming. This committee asked to see this presentation, so I appreciate you coming and doing it. As Business Development Director for SunTracks, can you tell us a little bit about how you're marketing the project and along with that, what kind of interest you're receiving?
Sure. Well, so far we haven't really had to do a lot because folks have just sort of descended upon us. So that tells us two things. That tells us that we're on the right track with what we've just spent about total. It'll be $160 million investment with tolling dollars, of course. That tells us that that investment is not in vain, and it also, secondly, tells us that the other proving grounds that are available both nationally and internationally are locking folks out for some reason. Either they're a startup company and they can't afford the rates, or the track time is just not available. So we're seeing that the demand is superseding what the supply is, and so we're confident that SunTracks will continue to have that momentum because of that. Once the operator becomes on board, they will help us even more with marketing and promoting the facility. They have the industry connections, they have the relationships, and they'll bring all of that, or they should bring all of that with them. So that'll be one piece of criteria that will determine who wins that contract, is who's able to show us that they have the strongest relationships within the industry.
Sure.
Follow up. When will you guys see a profit? When is that trajectory to be met?
Right, so recent study by KPMG sort of did the outlook that after the ramp-up period, so construction, everything will be done in 2021, they're estimating a 1 to 2 year ramp-up period. So after that ramp-up period is when the state is projected to see the revenue increase, or the revenue projections increase from the facility.
Okay, and a follow-up to that is, will DOT be reimbursed for what it is put into this project?
Exactly. So as I mentioned, the operator will take a portion of the revenue as part of their incentive to help generate new business, and then the state will take the other portion to go back into the facility to help the state recoup its tolling investment.
That will go back to the Turnpike Authority.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Because it's coming from your assets.
Correct. Correct.
And have you selected a operator?
We have not. On the website, we've listed all of the firms who have reached out to us, who've expressed interest. We're confident we'll have about 8 strong teams. And so when I say teams, that's going to be, folks who have maybe their lean is on track management and security, and they're going to partner up with some engineering or tech firms to go after the contract. So as an example, Daytona Speedway has expressed interest in going after the work. No one manages a track like Daytona, so they would partner with additional firms to go after the scope of work.
Fantastic presentation. Kelly?
Can we possibly have the video? Is that available?
Sure. It's actually on the Turnpike's YouTube page to be downloaded, but I'm happy to send out the link maybe through Michael, and he can distribute it out from there.
Thank you.
We could probably talk about this for longer, but thank you very much. We need to move on.
I understand. Thank you.
Oh, Bob, did
Just
you?
one quick little thing.
Yes.
As you mentioned, you're primarily concerned with private vehicles, trucks, etc. Our concern as an agency here is transit. And as you move on, if we're going to become a really viable metropolitan area, we're going to need transit. So we would like to see indications that you're increasing your commitment to the transit element, rail, bus, rapid transit, and anything else.
Exactly.
Because we can't stay with cars forever.
We can't. This is true. We cannot build our way out of our challenges. So absolutely.
If we had a majority or a quorum, that could be a motion that we would pass on to the board.
Yeah, we used to do things where for about 2 or 3 years, we were doing it by consensus.
Yeah, can we do that?
Yeah, you can do it by consensus.
Is there, are you all okay with passing that on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you phrase what you're passing on?
Addition of transit.
I think that it would be that the committee expresses a desire that the board recommend focus at this location on transit applications.
Yeah, increased emphasis
Going forward.
on transit in the future.
Going forward.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Now's the time to start looking for funding,
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
you know?
Mr. Chairman, I think I think that's appropriate and I support it, but I also would point out that transit needs the last mile connection. And this facility, I think, will help facilitate that last mile connection through autonomous vehicles, buses, and others.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
it all ties together.
Thank you.
Very good.
Okay,
Bill,
great.
this is Hoyt on the phone. Can
Yes.
you read what the proposed recommendation would be? It's based in that a little bit, but that's out tonight.
Well, hopefully Michael has been taking notes too, but I have that, that we need the board to recommend a increased emphasis in the future on transit at this location, and the applications to the first and last mile. Is that good?
I realize they're not gonna do what we say anyway, and they're gonna do what they wanna do, but I mean, is there any objection to necessarily saying, removing the word future and just saying that, you know, pass this along with the hope that there will be more of an emphasis on, transit in the first and last mile connection?
I say we just say we want transit, damn it.
Yeah. We want it now.
We want it now.
That's a good point.
I think there's
I
consensus.
put that in the notes, Karen.
Thank you.
Okay. Without objection, we will adopt that as a consensus of the committee.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Please take that back for what it's
Great
worth.
presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you for
All
having
right.
me.
Our next agenda item is the ITDP Bus Rapid Transit Standard, and Dave Sobush from the Tampa Bay Partnership will be making this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, TBARTA Citizens Advisory Committee. I am Dave Sobush. I am the Director of Policy and Research at the Tampa Bay Partnership, and I'm ready to go. All right, so for those that don't know, the Tampa Bay Partnership, public policy and advocacy organization with a simple mission. It's a simple mission, but not an easy mission, to create a unified, competitive, and prosperous Tampa Bay. We are CEO-driven. We are fact-based in our analysis and our agenda setting, and we focus on issues that rise above the geopolitical boundaries and that are prevalent throughout the marketplace. One of the issues that we've been working on for a few years has been regional transportation, and there's a lot of fact-based reasons to do that. One, this area is growing. The 4-county MSA in and of itself will add another 500,000 people by the year 2030. We do not have a tremendous amount of transit options, and in fact, when we do our benchmarking report, the regional competitiveness report, and we take a look at Tampa Bay against 19 other peer and aspirational markets, we find that Tampa Bay ranks last in terms of transit supply per capita. And as a result, only 16% of jobs are accessible to the average citizen within a 90-minute transit commute. So in the end, regional transportation is about connecting folks to opportunities that of either jobs or commerce or entertainment, our residents and tourists alike. Unfortunately, a lot of options are bubbling up on the screen. And on the scene, we have the Central Avenue BRT project of PSTA that is moving forward to connect downtown St. Petersburg to the beaches. Virgin Trains USA was alluded to in the previous presentation, connecting Florida super region to South Florida. Of course, the modernization and extension of the Tampa streetcar. I tripped over 4 scooters yesterday going to a meeting in downtown Tampa. We'll figure that out as we go along. And all of these options are really part of a larger regional transit vision. It's been said that there is no one silver bullet, that all these things are needed. And of course, one of the linchpins of this was the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan. And really what it did was go through a lot of different studies, and this committee is more familiar with it than I'll ever be, but to identify a catalyst project to get this regional transit vision moving. And the project that was selected, as you know, is the 41-mile rubber tire solution connecting Wesley Chapel to downtown St. Petersburg and all the major activity centers in between. As you know, this project is currently in project development through the auspices of TBARTA. The partnership's role, we feel, in this process and in the project development is, and we heard this on a fact-finding mission we took to Minneapolis, St. Paul, and we met with the Itasca Project, which is a group of CEOs in the Minneapolis, St. Paul, Twin Cities area that meet for breakfast once a month to tackle the big issues facing the Twin Cities region. And with regards to transit implementation, they said the role of the business community is to let the planners plan, the engineers engineer, and the business community helps set the vision and holds the community accountable to that vision and sets that standard and does not permit the process, for lack of a better word, to whittle the vision down to something less than what we all thought it would be at the beginning. And one of the ways we were fortunate that we didn't have to create a vision, there's a group out there, the Institute for Transportation Development Policy, that has published a vision and a standard for bus rapid transit projects. And real quick, the most important thing to take away from this is that it's very objective, it's very understandable, and it's very clear that if you do these things, you can achieve these different standards of success. So we're going to run through a little bit about what ITDP means by, basically what is BRT to begin with, as opposed to other forms of bus transit, and then how can a community position itself to achieve these different good housekeeping seal of approvals, if you will, for bus rapid transit, the bronze, silver, and hopefully gold. And it's the position of the partnership, our transportation working group, which has been chaired over the years by Chad Lohr, Barry Shevlin, TJ Selitowski, and Jeff Minnick, as well as our council of governors, that the project that is proposed through the project development process not deviate from a gold standard level. But to first start with what is bus rapid transit according to ITDP, there are 5 key factors. We'll run through them real quickly. The first one, and one of the critical ones, is dedicated bus lanes. You must score a minimum score on these dedicated bus lanes according to ITDP, or else you don't have bus rapid transit. And again, here's an example of a exclusive lane. You see that it is protected and separated physically. We'll see some other examples that aren't even this severe in terms of their physical separation. It has to be a median aligned busway. And it's not so much that it needs to be a median aligned busway, it's that it can't be a curb aligned busway. Because when you do that, you get delivery vehicles that park in the only bus. This is a transit oxymoron, I guess. And you also see, if you see the truck or vehicle that is turning in front of the bus, sort of in the middle center of the frame there, you are subject to these different turning movements. No turns across the intersection, and there's some good examples of that here in the United States, a bus rapid transit project in Las Vegas, where the turns, as you see in the upper right-hand corner, are not permitted across the busway, and it's all about keeping the schedule and keeping the speed on the transit vehicle. And again, intersection treatments, bus prioritization through the intersection is another way to accomplish that. Level boarding at the stations. And almost everything you see, even as we dive deeper into these standards and these features, is all about getting people on and off the bus as quick as possible and getting that bus back into a dedicated guideway as quick as possible. And again, here's an example here. People get right on, they step right on, no climbing up. This is also very good for your ADA requirements, as seen in the lower right of the screen. And again, paying before you get on the bus. So there is no queuing at the fare box. There is no fare box on a bus rapid transit vehicle because you've paid to even be waiting on the platform, much like a subway or light rail station. those are the basics, and you have to get a minimum score on those basics under the ITDP standard, and the rubric is included in your materials, and I thank Michael and the team here at TBARTA for doing that. But going beyond those basics, these are the other features that really define basic BRT into some of those higher standards of bronze, silver, and gold. The first one is service planning, and you want to make sure that the route is serving some demand, and that was one of the primary filters through the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan, and so check on that. You want to have good frequencies. We'll get into a little bit of ITDP's reflections on the proposed system as they saw it last year, and we know that it's going to change between what was proposed last year and now, and going forward, but you want to have good frequencies so that if you miss one vehicle, you know you're not waiting a tremendous amount of time for the next vehicle. It's part of the system, it's part of circulation throughout a region and a neighborhood and an urban area. Multiple routes. You don't want so much what's on the left-hand side of the screen where you have one service per corridor. You want multiple services per corridor. And that's something that can very easily be done with the Catalyst project, where you have it sort of skipping some stations. You might have a more, and I apologize for the oxymoron here, but a more local regional service that hits every one of those activity centers, or you might have one that just goes Wesley Chapel, downtown Tampa, downtown St. Petersburg, and skips the others. Control centers, where the activities of the vehicles are monitored closely, and they can alert drivers ahead of time to possible obstructions, and or notify a road ranger or a tow truck that there is a vehicle blocking a transit guideway. And again, the off-board fare collection. That looks very much like a subway turnstile. It looks very much like something you'd see on a rail premium service, but these are in fact BRT stations and BRT technologies that utilize these fare collection methods. 24-hour late night services, the more the better. You want it to be reliable and just as convenient as a personal vehicle. Into the infrastructure component of Beyond the Basics, again, that busway alignment where it's median aligned. You can share a platform here, as is this example. You want that segregated right away, and you notice that on the right-hand side of the screen, it is not a very well-defined physical barrier for that transit lane, but that is a physical barrier and qualifies as a dedicated alignment. If something were blocking the path here, a vehicle could very easily go over those rumble strips and get back into the lane at a later point. And again, here's an example in Madrid of a bus rapid transit with a physical barrier down the middle of a highway. You want to have passing lanes at stations, so if there is a delay and somebody boarding the vehicle and bus behind it isn't waiting, again, all of these standards tie back to getting that vehicle back on schedule and out of the station as quick as possible. Proof that this is a global group here, they spell minimize with an S. ITDP slides here that they presented to our committee last year. You want to make sure that you are protecting the health. You're designing for people in gold standard BRT, and so even the stations need to be reflective of that. And you need to make sure that you are minimizing exposure to vehicle emissions, or perhaps even better yet, utilizing electric vehicles and not having those vehicle emissions at the station. You want the station setback from intersections. 45 meters is about 150 feet. For those of you that have not yet adopted the metric system, President Carter told me to do it in the late 70s, and so I've been doing that ever since. But again, this is so that vehicles are not right at the intersection. They're not blocking traffic behind them, or they're not blocking another bus behind them. Center stations, and here are two examples. One is left side of the bus, one's right side of the bus, but they both qualify as center stations in a bus rapid transit gold standard system. Pavement quality, and this is, again, this doesn't seem like something that has to do with the speed or the reliability of the bus, but concrete is much more durable for the braking and acceleration that buses do at stations. If you have asphalt at a station, that will wear down faster. You will need to repair it more frequently. More repairs mean more time out of service. So even taking a look at the types of materials that go into the construction process is part of achieving the bus rapid transit gold standard. Station design and bus station interface, we'll touch more on this at the end. But when ITDP visited, they said, you know, everything that's planned here with this project, even as they saw it a year ago, this qualifies as BRT, subject to the right design choices. But the key to all of it is how are the stations going to integrate with the neighborhoods? And we'll go into a little bit about that. Again, here's the platform level boarding. In the upper left, the gentleman steps right across. In the lower right, he's straddling. He's looking a little bit like Harold Lloyd from one of those silent pictures in the old days. Safe and comfortable stations. They're protected from the elements. There are signs available. You see that there are some ADA compliance signage in the process. Single doors, no. Double wide doors, yes. Again, that enables people to get on and off the vehicles faster, get that bus back to where it needs to be moving. Docking bays and substops. Again, these are places people know exactly where to stop. The bus knows exactly where to stop. And buses can move around each other. They don't need to wait for the bus in front of them to move before they can move. Sliding doors in stations, again, wrapping up quite a few things. It's a signal for people to get on the bus. It also minimizes exposure to the elements. We want to take a look at how these systems integrate and their accessibility to the people. You want to make sure that you have access ramps to the platforms. Again, all of these stations and stops are going to be elevated so that you can walk directly onto the vehicle. You want to make sure it integrates with other modes of transit, and there's probably a bunch of other things you could put in here besides just this graphic says BRT Metro. Looks like there's a little kiss and ride, but you could have bike share. You could have 5 different scooter companies providing services in this area. Again, integrating with other public transport. You want to make sure that it's accessible to pedestrians. The picture in the upper left doesn't really show it too well, but that is a BRT station to the left. The guy that's standing inside a planter median, I don't know how well that would have gone this past week with the rain we've had, but somebody would have done a good business selling waiters. Again, secure bicycle parking because people will be using cycles to get to and from the stations. And again, here we see that vehicles of different types, both automobiles, bicycles, and pedestrians have their own path to traverse upon. And again, integration with bike sharing services, have them located close to the exit points from these stations. You want to make sure that the service is branded and people know that this is a premium service. One of the slights against the Silver Line in Cleveland, which is held up as it's the Health Line, it is a BRT Silver standard. One of the slights against it is it looks just like any other RTA bus up in that area. But communities that do this well, they brand the BRT as something above and beyond the typical bus service. Again, premium transit like BRT and light rail, it's the show horse, so it's got to be showy. It depends on the regular bus service to be the workhorse, but branding of the BRT is important in the ITDP BRT standard. And again, these sorts of passenger information, people know exactly how far the bus is away. It's very convenient for riders to understand how much time they have before they will be boarding a vehicle and on their way to their next destination. Having touched on the things you want to do, here are some things you don't want to do. You want to make sure that you are maintaining at least 12 miles per hour average speed in the entire service corridor. I think as designed with the 19 stops or 21 stops in the catalyst that was delivered last year, I think it was around 43 miles per hour. So definitely okay here. You don't want to have the service where there's low demand. You don't want to set this up to fail. You want to make sure that if you are going to have a permeable alignment, i.e. a place where somebody could conceivably get a vehicle in there, into the dedicated alignment, you want to make sure that there is good enforcement. If you see things like this is not good enforcement, and points are deducted. And that's an important thing, is that systems can be rated based on their construction and their design, but ITDP is very adamant that they will not certify a bus rapid transit system until it's in operation, and in operation for a while, so they can see how well it actually performs as opposed to how it looks on paper. Again, you do not want to have big gaps between the station and the bus. That's a no-no. And you want to make sure that while you have stations, they're not prohibiting, the travel of other cyclists and pedestrians. It's a complement to the network and not an impediment to other modes. The flip side of lack of demand is when there's too much demand, and so overcrowding is a place where you can get nicked in your score. And again, poorly maintained buses and stations. It's a premium service. It needs to have a premium appearance. So that said, ITDP was invited by the project team to Tampa Bay in May of 2018. They toured the entire route. They looked at the Catalyst project as it appeared on paper. Scott, this is going to be, and let the record show I'm referring to Scott Pringle of WSP. This is probably ancient history at this point based on the work that you've been doing since May of 2018. But this is the project they evaluated. And again, they said that everything was on the up and up. This is BRT. There's nothing that prohibits BRT from operating in a freeway environment. And it really gets down to how does it integrate with the stations. I'm not going to go through, again, here's the scoring rubric and the points available. There's 100 points available through the scoring. There's also 63 points they can take away from you. And you need to perform at a very high level to get to that goal. But it is certainly attainable and something that I hope this committee would advise the TBARTA board to hold the design and engineering of the Catalyst project to the gold standard. This presentation we made available to you, and I know that we don't have a ton of time. What I want you to take away from their initial comments about the proposed Catalyst project related to the different components of the ITDP standard is a lot of question marks and a lot of TBDs, meaning we can't answer this right now. This will be answered in the PD&E process, in the planning and design, during that project development phase. This is the time we need to hold the standard high. And so every place that has a question mark, every place that has a TDB, these are the things that we need to say, this is what we want, we don't deserve anything less. So I won't go through all of them, but I did want to say a quick note on the stations. Transit is to move people. Trucks move goods, transit moves people. So design for the people, design for the public, integrate the stations into the community. And you see, even though we're talking about walking distance for passengers, minimizing delay time, these are really functions of making sure the system performs at peak efficiency and capacity. We heard this from ITDP last year, and so what the partnership did is I said I'm the director of policy and research, so the more research we do, the greater likelihood that the lights stay on at the Sobush home. So I was pleased that the research that was done initially instigated more research. We commissioned the USF Florida Center for Community Design and Research to take a look at what if we wanted to incorporate the ITDP bus rapid transit standards and also ITDP's transit-oriented development standards into some proposed stations in Tampa Bay, what would those look like? And so they took a look at 3 different station types: an urban station in Hillsborough County, a business center station in Pinellas County, and a suburban station in Pasco County. And we said, here's what they say we should, aspire to. What should these things look like? Here is that example of a station on Florida Avenue and Waters. It doesn't look anything like this right now, but these are the things that and the goals that using those standards it could look like in that area. And for those that aren't entirely familiar with Bird Street and in Florida, this is kind of where that water tower is. There's also a Kentucky Fried Chicken. I made sure that Taryn Savia and the team at the USF School of Architecture did not remove the Kentucky Fried Chicken. She assured me there's somewhere in the ground level floor of the transit center. Here is something similar that might appear just across the way in the Caroline Office Park, connecting folks and again incorporating those design standards for the gold standard. And again, you see in a suburban area in Wesley Chapel, the scale is somewhat smaller. There might be a greater influence on park and ride for folks to drive to that station and get on the regional spine, carrying them to their ultimate destination or to another rib, if you will, on the spine of that regional service. Went through that quickly. Can you believe that was 79 slides? That was amazing. Thank you, Dave. So I'm happy to stand for any questions, Mr. Chair.
Well, we had allocated about 20 minutes, and you've got 20 minutes there.
Perfect.
But I'm sure the board committee members would like to talk about this quite a bit more. We do have a few other items on our agenda, and I don't know kind of how you want to deal with the agenda, because we could spend another 20 minutes talking about this, I think.
Short.
Bob, go ahead.
If I may, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You said the ID, they can't really give you a score yet, but you showed the 5 categories with some question marks and TBDs.
Yeah.
If all the question marks and TBDs were okay or not okay, do you have a range of what that score would look like?
They said, depending on the design choices you make, this could not be BRT at all, or depending on the design choices you make, this could be gold standard BRT.
Okay, so yeah,
So
85 or
it's
above.
up to us, and that is the collective us.
Thank you.
Karen?
I just have a ton of questions. First is, what's the time between St. Pete and downtown Tampa? What is the proposed time frame?
TBD.
Okay, all right, we don't have to go any further. Are we gonna standardize the bus sizes? Because if you build the platforms, the bus companies don't necessarily build the same bus. We're not ordering all our buses at the same time.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because some of these, like this example here of Florida Avenue and Bird Street, you'd want that to be used by both the regional catalyst, but you'd also want it to be used by anything arterial BRT. So it's going to take a lot of coordination, a lot of cooperation between the multiple providers of transit within the community to design a system that is flexible enough to accommodate these different types of service.
And one more question. Are we building overpasses? Because I see within this elevation, we're seeing crosswalks across the BRT. And that's something that can't necessarily, that should not be there.
You can have crosswalks across a BRT corridor. You have to control the passenger flow.
The pedestrian flow, yeah.
Yeah.
Are we going to be building more overpasses to accommodate the BRT?
That is all subject to the project development phase, and how the vehicles will egress and ingress back into the transit envelope is what they're working on. It wasn't cheap what we asked USF to do, but it wasn't, it wasn't a project development, exercise.
Ask for the world and get what you get.
Well, I think somewhat, but these are all choices to be made, and what you see many times in the process, and what we heard speaking with other business groups is, hold that vision and say, this is what we want. We're, make the decision that's in the best interest of the system long term, not what piece of property is available today, what might be the cheapest. And these are tough decisions, right? Nobody wants to make them. You always want to make the easiest decision possible. I know I do. But to hold the gold standard out there is what this community wants, and frankly what the 18th largest metropolitan area in the United States deserves and is long overdue for. It's going to be up to us and committees like this to make sure that standard is what is clearly communicated to those that make the decisions.
Bill. Dave, thanks very much.
My pleasure.
Is there any way to quantify the cost difference between silver to gold or any of those? I mean, is there a guideline that says it's 15% more expensive, or I know it's.
And I assume you don't mean the commodities market, but rather.
Talking about BRT.
Okay. Because it's so decision specific, I mean, this, if the BRT, the regional BRT went from 21 stations to some fewer number, but even if it stayed at 21 stations, that's still 42 individual ingress and egress decisions that need to be made. And each one is, I mean, I'm not a planner, I'm married to one. I'm not an engineer. I did the crossword puzzle too much in college. Those are decisions that I would just assume are pretty complicated, pretty case specific. So to say on average, I don't know that that's been done. That would be something interesting to take a look at. But it seems to me that it would be so project specific and so decision by decision specific.
I suspected that was the answer, but we've been asked, I think, to recommend to the TBARTA board that they support the gold standard. So I think as a part of that recommendation, I think it would be helpful if we added to that the PD&E study try to quantify that cost going forward. That'd be my thought.
If I may, on your website, there were 10 scores already given out in the United States. There were 3 basic, 5 bronze, and 2 silver. So they've got some history here.
And that I believe is the ITDP website.
Yeah.
Okay, and we might have incorporated that. The partnership is stood up as an easy reference, TampaBayBRT.com, as a place to get information about BRT. It's true, there's not a single operating gold standard BRT in the United States. The Albuquerque system was, it got a sort of preliminary design gold standard, but decisions they made, between sort of final design and through the construction phase, took it down a little bit.
Excuse me, and therein lies my question, because we just heard a presentation on SunTrax. 2 pretty attractive features of SunTrax got axed from the project because they were expensive. And so I think if we're going to shoot for the gold standard, sooner or later we need to quantify what that's going to cost.
And then make a decision based on that.
At some point.
Yeah.
And it's been a while since the original Catalyst study identifies the BRT and then did cost analysis that selected this BRT to be the project to go forward. Was it held to the gold standard from a cost perspective during that analysis, or are we now upping the game, so to speak?
Well, my understanding is that there were planning level estimates used, and they were very conservative, and they even had sort of an overrun cost feature on their overruns. So those are sort of sketch level at the feasibility analysis step of the process. And again, as you go through, there will be more specificity and more detailed analysis of these individual components. But for one example, I don't think the frequency as contemplated in the original Catalyst project that was developed in May of, that was in draft form of May of 18, had the headways that would qualify for gold standard. It would qualify for BRT. So that's adding more vehicles and more operators. So yes, there could be some push and pull in the process. And that's sort of the purpose of identifying at a high level which projects. And again, there's multiple projects in that vision. The rubber tire solution on 275 was identified as a catalyst project. Moving forward into that is when sort of the details are really unveiled and understood more clearly.
It has 1.3 to 1.6 billion in the old RP. I was wondering the same thing.
Yeah, 'cause now it seems like it's a moving target, or may have skewed the results. I don't know, it's been a while, but that was just the
Until
point.
there's concrete poured, it's
Right.
always gonna be that way, though.
So, based on what we heard, is there anything you would pass on to the board at this point in time?
We want transit, damn it.
We have a consensus on that.
I can't remember if our previous meeting, we agreed to endorse the gold standard, or it came before us and we agreed to ask partnership to come explain it to us, and
I
we're
think
at
it
the
was the
point.
second.
Yeah, so now we've heard that presentation, so I think maybe we make a recommendation that we consider it in some form for the board.
Well, we will have an update on the Catalyst PD&E a little bit later, so we can ask where that is going. Maybe it would be appropriate to wait until we get to that point.
Mr. Chair, if I may, the comment made earlier by committee member Roberts to, as information comes to the CAC regarding the project development phase, to ask for that information from the project manager would be an appropriate, I think, thing to ask.
I think we're gonna do that unless they lock the door and keep us out. So,
Well, specifically related to the gold standard versus
Yes.
others.
okay.
Thank you.
Do we move on to Envision 2030? Michael, you were gonna present this. We have a extensive document that was distributed with the agenda. No. We have some.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I did include in your packet a summary of the final results for the Envision 2030 Regional Transit Needs Survey. I didn't prepare slides for this, as it would just be a duplication of those tables that were included in your packet. So recall, we did have Tim Dale Oliver present in the last meeting a highlight of some of those results, which at the time we had somewhere around 411 responses. And I'm happy to say that with help from our communications director, we were able to get the word out and double those responses. So we ended up with about 811 responses in total. So even since we doubled it, though, a whole lot of things didn't really change as far as results. So what I'm going to do is just kind of briefly highlight a few things that have changed since that time. But first, a few brief reminders on why we're doing this now, and a quick little note on limitations as well. So the purpose of this survey really is to gauge where we are as a region with awareness and attitudes toward regional transit, and help determine and focus what kinds of projects and priorities might be supported by the public for implementation to start building out that transit network. So this is particularly important, as Dave noted in his presentation. We're expecting 500,000 more people in our region by 2030, and at the same time greatly lacking in transit supply and use. So it's important to know what people want, what they think they want, and being able to have the opportunity to meet them halfway with giving them what they want. So our limitations here, this was not a statistically valid survey, meaning we can't say with a level of certainty that these results really reflect regional attitudes in general. So building on this, we do have another survey we're putting out at the beginning of October, the MetroQuest survey, which I'll talk about a little bit later here, as well as a survey after that next year that will be scientific and statistically significant. So from the top, again, we closed the survey back in July, ending with 811 responses, again, doubling the amount we had in June, initially presented to you. And in our outreach, we were able to broaden our geographic distribution bit. We reached just over half of Hillsborough County zip codes, a quarter of Pinellas County zips, including northern Pinellas, about 12% of Manatee, 11% of Pasco, and a whole 1% of Hernando County. So some lessons learned there as we put together our outreach approach for MetroQuest and how to engage them, what zip codes were responsive and which ones were not. So who responded? Again, mostly we have Hillsborough County residents here, and adding in an age range of 25 to 54 years old. Most also had 2 or more cars shared by multiple drivers and one licensed driver. And most also had an annual household income of $100,000 or more. So this is important, something to keep in mind as we go through this, and that these responses appear to be coming from who we might call choice riders or higher income people with cars. And that's in contrast to what we would call, in some cases, captive riders or lower income people who have to use transit because they don't own a car. So on to results, starting with question 1. And this is consistent with the previous report. A large number of people did indicate that they were aware of TBARTA and its purpose, which is good for us, but of course something we need to continue to build on. And the second question, a large percentage of respondents have ridden transit in the last year or every few months, and that's also consistent with the previous report. On the third question, a high percentage of respondents across the region are also aware of transit services, particularly those in Hillsborough County. So Hart, the Cross Bay Ferry, and the Ybor streetcar. And you can see it drops off for services in other counties. So, to us, that indicates a bit of a lack of awareness of available transit services by residents outside the counties in which they live. So one of the things we are focusing on in Envision 2030, as well as in the PD&E, is regional branding. So it might be also an opportunity for us in the future to continue to get surveys out to gauge what people's awareness are of regional services and if that's increased or decreased, and what we can do about that. The fourth question, number 1 reason for not using transit. We see no change from June here in that the top response, it does not go where people need it to go. People also said they prefer to drive, which we assume is likely a factor of comfort, time, and convenience. So I think something we want to take and try to implement into our project recommendations into the PD&E at some point. Question 5, just a couple more to go through here, also consistent with June. Notably, I think the Ybor streetcar is the most widely used service of the respondents. I'll share a county breakdown, but obviously Hillsborough County is a heavy factor in there. But 8% of Pinellas County respondents, 3% of Pasco, 1% of Manatee, and 6% other, meaning respondents that didn't include zip code that we could say what county they're from, indicated they were aware of that service. Question 6, most respondents use transit once every few months or less. Again, I think derivative of who the responses are from here in those choice riders. So, but building on that, I think we could all agree, in addition to getting to and from work across the region, particularly for inter-county commuters, that some of the responses here are indeed accurate and salient, and people still want the ability to noted in question 7, to travel to entertainment and the airport, with 54% of those respondents saying it was very important and 30% saying it was somewhat important. And building on that as well, question 8, travel to work, airports, hotels, and entertainment were the top desired destinations for transit. Again, keep in mind who is responding to this here. And finally, question 9, focusing on potential solutions to identified issues. Response indicated increased frequency was something that would certainly help resolve issues. A single payment system, which is being implemented through Flamingo Fares, as well as more weekend service, morning and evening commute hours would make it more beneficial to them and thus more desirable to use. So with that, I mean, that wraps up the survey. I focus on what the purpose of it is, the results. And before I get into our next steps, does anyone have any questions or comments on this?
Don't see any here.
We're still awake, Michael.
Sorry, I'll try to spice up my presentation here
Thank
a
you.
little bit. So MetroQuest. This really is just a brief update on our next phase of outreach, which will include an interactive MetroQuest survey, as well as a digital media campaign, speakers bureau presentations, and attendance at events around the region, much like we did for this first survey. So starting with MetroQuest, I think some of you in the room may have some experience with this already, in that the MPOs have used MetroQuest for a number of years now for scenario planning in their LRTPs. So we're using it here in a similar kind of application, but focusing on building consensus around some broad regional investment strategies. And by that, things like ridership potential, connecting major destinations, what kinds of projects could be return on investment, economic development, and ease of implementation. We're also going to be looking for consensus on short-term and long-term projects as well. Presently, we're in the process of developing the design and evaluation criteria that are going to be a part of how that survey operates. And when ready, we'd actually like to send it out for you to test and provide us feedback on it. So we're anticipating that to be on or before September 18th. And we're giving about a week, so final review of it will occur on September 25th and an intended launch no later than October 3rd. So keep an eye on your emails, please, because we will be sending something out for you to peruse through it and again, give us your feedback on how you think it operates. Maybe we're missing something, or maybe possibly even there's information in there we don't need. So we greatly value your input there. And just a quick note about outreach, our communications director, Chris Jadek, in addition to working on the new TBARTA website, which unfortunately we don't have an update on that for you today, is putting together a media campaign, as well as the potential for some giveaway contests, so we can use kind of some incentives to get people to respond to the MetroQuest survey. He's working on some social media as well. So we've got a lot going on with this project. Obviously, our time frame is to have it all done here by September of next year, but this is really a big part of developing where we think the public will support certain strategies and projects, and will help the board determine whether or not, it's something that fits in with the overall mission and strategy of TBARTA. So, Mr. Chair, that concludes my summary, and if anyone has any questions or comments, I'd be happy to take them.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yeah, Michael, let me go back to attachment 4 of your Envision. And I'll say it this way, as a member of this committee, I expect to be involved.
You see the problem with the map?
No. As a member of this committee, I expect to be involved in some things. And for this outreach, I sent out more than 50 emails myself. I showed up at the county courthouse to make sure that the bus stuff was there. I wasn't going to hand it out at Walmart. I didn't think that was appropriate, although those are good bus riders,
Yes.
you know. And I attended both library presentations, and we had a good crowd come in there. And the only thing I can say is on the map, you can see that on the western side of Hernando, where I live, we had a better response, but 11 people. I think I didn't do you right, Michael, and I apologize for that.
Oh, you know, I mean, we put together a media campaign and we hammered Hernando County as well. But I think it just happens to be something, I mean, you know, Hernando County, maybe, not that you all don't care about transit, of course, but I think it's probably on more people's minds in Hillsborough and Pinellas County, given the level of growth and congestion that's already in those two counties. So honestly, it's not all that surprising, but we did put our best foot forward to give Hernando County the opportunity to weigh in here. So we're hoping for better results and turnout with the MetroQuest survey.
I didn't see who was first. Rick?
Michael, with regards to the, what was it, MapQuest, or not MapQuest, but
MetroQuest.
Thank you, MetroQuest. Have you reached out to the MPOs who recently used that? Because I think that, at least now speak from our CAC, because, you know, we went through that, and there was some concern that sometimes it was a little misleading or things weren't clear, and then they went back and looked at the results. They're like, well, that's not really how I feel. So I just want to be sure that there was, maybe you could reach out to them to get some feedback on what they did or heard, just a comment or suggestion.
Bill, we have somebody back there who's willing to answer
And
that.
back in the field, I
Sure.
can address that. I'm Chris Jadek, TBARTA Communications Director. I have spoken to both folks with the Hillsborough MPO as well as Fort Pinellas, got some feedback on that. I did not hear any feedback directly on the results. We did talk about how they marketed and some of the approaches they used. They were a little bit different and stuff like that, but there is some communication going there, and I think you make a good point. Because, like, you know, those lines of communication are open.
Thank you. Yep, great.
And on that, I thought Pinellas just piggybacked on Hillsborough's MPO's usage, so it's
And
only.
building on,
Go ahead.
yeah, building on that, I know Fort Pinellas had its own MetroQuest survey out, which was shortly after the Tampa Bay survey as well. So, you know, those two things coincided together. But I think the point is well taken that, you know, there's been a lot of lessons learned in how to put together a really good MetroQuest survey that is clear and avoids the potential to be misleading to the public. So taking those comments and being, I'd say, a step ahead here, we had put together a group, regional public participation plan group with the MPOs, and brought it to the attention of the directors of each of the MPOs that we would very much like to reach out to that group and have them weigh in on the construction of the survey, the evaluation criteria, all the way down to what we're calling some of these investment strategies and short and long-term projects. Yeah,
Great.
we're
Thank you.
already headed down that road.
Thank you.
Bill, did you have something?
I did, thank you. Michael, Bill Roberts, I'm looking at the comment category tag 2, and I find the results to be somewhat confusing, but they show 18% comment on general mass transit support, and then a 28% response indicating support for rail. Do you have any observations about that 28% on the rail? And secondly, do you have any observations you could share with us on this whole tag 2 comment? Because some of those are pretty low that I thought might be higher.
Yeah, on the, so the first part of your question, which one specifically were you referring to, Bill?
The rail support being at 28%, do you read anything into that, or is that just a raw report?
Attachment 5.
Yeah,
Tag
I think it's probably a part of who our respondents were here, like all the rest of the results. I would expect that we would have probably some very different results here if we had hit some different income categories. Very few of respondents were in the 35,000 or less annual household income. So, that said, most people here have a car, so their support for transit is probably not as high as some of the other cohorts are in that regard. So, and then you mentioned tag 2.
Yeah, this is attachment 5, tag 2, the comment category, which is what I'm looking at. And I think you've answered that question as well, because I think what you're saying is that this just reflects the opinions of the sample size and may not be as widely representative of the entire market. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this isn't something I would say we could generalize toward attitudes in the region. So, but recognizing that limitation, we're taking some of these results with a grain of salt. Others, I think, certainly, the awareness of transit can be used, but later on in the project, we're going to take a more scientific approach here with a polling team and actually get something out that will be representative of the region. So stay tuned for that.
Okay.
Michael, this is Bill. The one additional guidance I would have on the MetroQuest is that all of the counties use the same standard method of projecting out into the community. I think one of the things that on the MPO study, MetroQuest, that the Hillsborough piggybacked on some property appraisers' information going out, and so we need it to be consistent throughout, so we don't see deviations that aren't there. And Karen, how about one last comment?
With this, I'd like to know what the target market's going to be, and with that said, can we differentiate between actual voters and people who are writing who need it? Because we're going to be dealing with the voters rather than the people that are actually writing, and we need to get both those universes together somehow.
Right. Well, with the riders, we certainly are looking at augmenting these results with the onboarding surveys that each transit agency conducts on an annual basis. But insofar as trying to hit one target audience or another, we can try through some of the strategies that social media and targeted media allows, but at the end of the day, it is self-selected. So, there's no real way to segment an audience, say, and make sure we get, a sufficient number of transit riders as opposed to a sufficient number of non-transit riders. So it's getting the message out as broadly and as effectively and consistently as possible, and kind of hoping for the best response.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Chris Jadek again. Just to address the geography issue in the outreach, to give you a little clarity on how we did that. Within our 5-county area, Hillsborough makes up about 44% of the population, Orlando's 5%, those are the outliers there. So you'd hope that if the survey was truly representative, you'd have those proportions. Obviously, Hillsborough's higher, Orlando is less. We recognize that half the way in, and we did a small media purchase, we did some digital buys and some ads. We actually weighted that more toward the outlying counties such as Hernando. So to give you an example, we did some outreach with Charter Communications, and we split it 20% for each county. The thinking being, okay, Hernando's not responding as much, we're not to ignore Hillsborough. We're only going to spend 20% in Hillsborough. We'll spend 20% in Hernando. That kind of means on a per capita basis, we put more weight in Hernando. We actually did a print ad in a special edition of the Times on a Saturday, just one ad. It was a small thing. So we did a little extra in Hillsborough, or in Hernando, I should say, and still didn't really get the results we were looking for in terms of proportion. So I just want to let you know, it's easier, obviously, to get Hillsborough people that are more engaged in transit, possibly. That's why they come back in. But I just want to give you a little clarity to that. Now, as we look at how we're going to market, we'd obviously still like to continue to even all of that out, so we're aware of that. But in our outreach in this survey, we did try to weigh it more toward those outlying areas to try to get a more inclusive audience. It might have helped, but obviously it did not get us exactly where we wanted to go.
I want to thank Bob for getting those 11 people.
You're not getting the Christmas card, I don't care.
Okay, Bob, different Bob.
Different Bob Hangen. Michael, another thing that just seems to come out to me is what Bob Whitbar was talking about before, Karen. We really don't have a good enough sampling of people who actually use the transit. It's one thing for us to sit here and say, I don't use it because it doesn't go where I want to, doesn't go often enough, and so forth. But we really need more feedback from those who are actually using it on a regular basis.
Yeah, and I think we might have an opportunity with the scientific survey. I'm just kind of throwing that out there, not really knowing whether or not that's true or not. But certainly something I think that taking a more statistically valid sample of the population, and maybe the opportunity with whatever firm we work with to segment a population of just transit riders to gauge their opinions selectively, we may be able to do that. So we'll certainly report back to this committee on how that develops.
Okay. Shall we move on then to next information and announcements? Introduction of new staff. Michael, you have the floor.
Yeah, I'm just going to cue this up real here. So we did recently hire a new principal planner and project manager, Mr. Brian Pissarro. Mr. Brian Pissarro, please stand.
He's standing.
So I'm just going to cue you up, Brian. He was previously a senior research associate at Cutter. He's like other transit professionals here. He's made the rounds here with different agencies, as well as outside of Florida as well, and has done a lot of work in the realm of BRT. He is managing the PD&E project. So, Brian, if you want to give the committee a short introduction of yourself. Sure.
I'm going on my second week at TBARTA. As Michael mentioned, prior to that, I worked at the Center for Urban Transportation Research. I was there just shy of 10 years. Cutter has a number of different research teams. I was on two of them. One of them was called the National Bus Rapid Transit Institute. So I did a lot of evaluation of BRT systems in the U.S., particularly with an emphasis on BRT systems that operate on interstate highways. Prior to that, I was at the Florida Department of Transportation, and prior to that, I worked at the MPO out in San Diego. So glad to be here.
Welcome. Okay, well, welcome. Do you want to comment on the project?
Sure, I'll give you an update on the project development and environmental study for the Catalyst project on I-275. Work began in May. The goal is to complete the study within 28 months. So that puts us out to summer of 2021. When the PD&E study is finished, we will have accomplished 4 things. We will have completed the environmental review for the project. The project will be 30% designed. The project will be adopted into the cost-feasible long-range transportation plans of the 3 MPOs, Hillsborough, Pasco, and Pinellas. And 4th, we will have enough information to put together into a packet to send off to the Federal Transit Administration so that they can evaluate it and decide whether they are going to fund it through either their New Starts or their Small Starts program. Where we are right now in the study, we are focused on the BRT stations. The Regional Transit Feasibility Plan, which is where this Catalyst project came from, identified or recommended 21 stations. We're taking a closer look at those stations right now to see if we need to refine either the number or the locations of them. WSP, who is our consultant, has come up with some draft evaluation criteria for the stations that are based on the criteria that FTA is going to use when they look at them. Last Wednesday, we had our kickoff meeting for what we are calling the Stations Working Group. That is a group composed of land use planning staff from the 3 counties. We want to get their feedback on the stations. You know, what do they have planned in terms of transit-oriented development in those locations that we're looking at? Once we nail down the number and locations of the station, then we can get into the design. And we can start looking at ingress and egress from the stations. Besides that, other work that our consultant has been working on since we last updated you was been doing a lot of data collection. They've done drone surveys of the 275 corridor. They are developing a project management plan as well as a public involvement plan. And related to that, related to the public involvement plan, 2 things I want to let you know about. They are developing a project website. The latest I heard was, I think, are we still planning on launching it September 1st, or has that changed? So the project website will be launched very soon, September 1st, and what I'm really excited about is they've almost finished developing the first of what will be a series of really high professionally made informational videos that will help visually show the public this is what we are planning for the corridor. Scott Pringle, who is the project manager from our consultant team, is here. If you've got any questions, I mean, we'll be happy to take them.
Bill.
Scott, I have a question for you. Thank you. This is probably way premature, but in your planning, are you making any assumptions about the DOT's rebuild plans for the West Shore interchange and the downtown interchange?
Absolutely.
And what phase are you looking at?
Absolutely. We're going to have to stay very close to all the plans that FDOT's putting forward on the I-275 corridor. Obviously, a big benefit of this concept is that it leverages roadway highway dollars for the benefit of transit. So we need to stay lockstep with what FDOT's doing all across the corridor. That not only includes the different phases of TB Next and the improvements, like you mentioned, State Route 60 interchange, but also work that they're doing on intermodal centers. They're looking at 6 intermodal centers across the region because that'll have a direct impact on this project. So we're working very closely with FDOT. I'm in the process of right now scheduling essentially what's sort of an internal presentation to all the TB Next designers to make sure that we keep those lines of communication open because it's going to be critical. And it'll be really important as we move through the effort because in a lot of ways we're going to be talking about how we can construct this project. Does it need to be in phases or something else? And that dialogue about potential phasing of the project construction over time has to be synchronized with everything that the department's doing on the interstate.
Okay. Did we want to cycle back to the question that we were asking about the BRT standard? Is there a target, or is that too early to?
Well, we certainly aspire to the gold standard. I mean, what's the old saying? Shoot for the stars, and if you don't get the stars, you'll get the moon. I mean, I think that is our approach.
So there will be a cost estimate process in there regarding the gold. I think that's where we were before. That we have to understand what that trade-off is if it's not the gold standard.
Yeah, I mean, Scott and I were talking a little bit about this. I think maybe one thing that we possibly could do in the study is maybe take a segment of the corridor and do like a comparison of like, this is what it would have cost you if you tried to do all the bells and whistles and maybe several other alternatives so that you can see what the cost breakpoints are.
Okay, good.
The stations will be the biggest portion of the cost, is that correct?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the line, 80%?
Well, because the heavy lift on the running way itself is those highway dollars that we're gonna take advantage of. So yeah, as far as the transit dollars goes, it's stations.
Stations, and then it's employees after that, drivers.
Fleets, operations, gas, drivers, the whole thing, yeah.
Well, you gotta get
That's not part of P.
from the road to the station if the station's not in the road envelope.
Yeah, and I think that conversation about stations really kind of, anytime we've been talking to folks over the past several years, but even more so the past couple of months, that question about what is the station, where are the stations, what do they look like, how does that work, keeps bubbling up to the top. So because of that, we actually advanced the station conversation right to this first milestone. We were kind of thinking about doing that in milestone 2. And our approach to that is, let's first look at the 21 different station areas, which is the half-mile buffer around a particular point along the corridor. Let's figure out, do we need all 21, or can it be half that, a quarter of that, 3/4 of that? Let's make that decision, and then we just keep narrowing down the field. We limit those station areas if it's deemed appropriate, and then start looking for what types or the typologies of stations that occur in each one of those station areas. So is it in the interstate? Is it off the interstate? Is it on the side of the interstate? What does it look like? And then we even get even more detailed and start looking at possible site locations.
I just have a general, probably a naive question. You know, you look at the Tampa International, and they announced the plan. They got it built. They're on phase 2. I mean, over the last couple of years, we've been talking about this for a long time, and it's not going to be, the PD&E is not going to be done till the summer of 2021.
Yeah, I mean, we have to follow federal law, including the National Environmental Policy Act, and that in itself has its own, schedule that kind of gets dictated to us. We're targeting 28 months. Our contract is actually for 3 years, but the reality is, if we took our team and put them into a room and locked them up for a couple of months, they could probably hammer out a lot of the engineering relatively quickly. But what we can't lose sight of is the importance of having the community dialogue and getting that consensus across along the way. And that's what we're anticipating as part of the schedule. And, we've got 3 years. We wanted to get it done in 28 months, but we've got 3 years because we might end up in a situation where we need to actually just kind of pause and have a robust conversation with the community and then get back to work. So you're going to see that ebb and flow throughout that time frame.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Meetings and events upcoming. Michael?
Yeah, just real quick, we noted some events that are coming up here, 2 of which are a little further down the road, the 2019 Safe Routes to School Conference. And as a part of that, also the Gulf Coast Safe Streets Summit, both November 12th to the 14th at Hilton Tampa downtown. We did include the registrations for both of those events, but you can register for just the Gulf Coast Safe Streets Summit if you don't want to attend the full Safe Routes to School conference. A little closer, there is the Tampa Bay TMA Leadership Group meeting on September 6th. That's going to be at Hillsborough County this time in their Planning Commission boardroom. And not included here, because I just learned about it, but the Tampa Bay Mobility Alliance is having a State of Transportation meeting tomorrow, August 22nd at 9 a.m. at the Tampa Airport. Our own David Green will be participating in a discussion panel with Ben Limmer of Hearts, Brad Miller of PSTA, and Pasco County Commissioner Mike Moore. Mayor Kreisman is giving the keynote for that event, and I plan on forwarding the email that I received in case anyone in this group is interested in registering their attendance.
Okay. I had the add-on relative to Flamingo passes and transit user experiences. Michael, do you have an update on the Flamingo passes?
I do, yes. So unfortunately, I think everybody received the email I sent out last month that the Flamingo Fares program has been temporarily suspended due to some technological upgrades and testing in the expansion of the system. So the additional information I received and where they are with that is they expect to be back up and running in January of 2020. So not as soon as we would like, but certainly I know that they're working on expediting this whole process.
So in the meantime, hang on to our cards.
We'll have to get new cards. So we'll keep in contact with Hart staff when they're ready and the new system is done and the cards can be validated. We'll reach back out to you and let you know. And in case any information has changed, you can let us know at that time. Otherwise, we have all your information ready, and we'll give it to them once they are.
Okay, great. How about transit user experiences? Anybody want to offer up some transit user experiences? Anybody on the phone? I will say that I took one of my granddaughters over to Tampa, and we got on the streetcar in Ybor City and rode it around. And it's really a kind of a neat adventure. Got off, went to the History Center, got back on. There weren't very many riders at the time, but it was something I would recommend. I also took the bus from Countryside Mall down to the PSTA board meeting, and found that it took me about an hour and a half instead of the
20 minutes.
30 minutes maybe to get there regularly. There was a 20-minute layover at the change point. The bus was comfortable. Bus operators were friendly. Since once I got down here, I tried using the Direct Connect. That's the Uber that goes from one of the stations to a local spot. I wanted to go over just about a half a mile over here to see a buddy of mine that works in the industrial park here. And I found that really very easy to use. I think it cost me about $2.25 or $2.50 each of those instead of the $7 or $8 that it would have been without the subsidy. And so that was my transit experience. Anybody else?
I took the streetcar as well from the Florida Aquarium up to Ybor City just for some lunch and stuff, but there was a lot of people on there that day. It was a Saturday. Went and did the market in Ybor City, farmers market. It was a good day.
We were on Monday when the what do you call the food court stuff is not in operation on Monday. So it was not a good day to do that. Okay. I had wanted to talk about future, how we better do our job and report to the board. I want to make sure that when you come to this meeting, it feels like it's worthwhile for your trip or your participation on the phone. And wonder whether this board would like to schedule in some time on the agenda to just talk about that at our October meeting. Or do you think we're doing just fine the way we are?
No, I always need to prove for improvement. If there's a way to improve, then let's do it.
Okay.
I think it'd be worth it.
Okay.
Sure, I'm sure the committee members have some ideas or suggestions, things that they'd like to pursue within the committee. Yeah, I think putting it on the agenda would be good. It was our CAC for the Hillsborough MPO is added an agenda item called members' interests. It sometimes gets a little bit lengthy, but the objective is to let people do just what Chairman Bill has suggested, bring up things that they would like to see at a future meeting. So that's the way we're headed.
And Pasco County MPO CAC is doing the same.
Yeah.
And I will do that on Thursday. Thanks for the idea.
Okay. Michael, let's take that as an action for our October board meeting to discuss that a little bit more.
Okay, got it.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
If the committee is amenable to it, one of the things we would like to bring back to the committee at the next meeting is we'd like to vet some of the goals and objectives for the Catalyst project to the committee.
Great. I'm speaking for myself anyway.
So you're welcome here at every meeting if you
Yeah.
any sort of update. I think that's the I think
we
goal
need-
right now.
yeah.
Yeah, this
big
project is so important
Every
to
time.
everything
Yep,
Yeah.
that we're doing.
should be a standing
Yeah,
update.
standing order.
Okay. Any other requests for the next meeting?
I'd like to know where it's gonna be held.
It's scheduled for Wesley Chapel. That's that,
American
And that would be
Engineering.
October.
American
yes.
Consulting.
Sorry.
We were up there once before.
I think so.
We had some problems with the audio, the
That's right.
audiovisual equipment, if you need something to remember it by.
Yeah, it was just off 75.
That's right,
Yeah.
by the ice rink.
It's about as, it's a long way from here.
It's a long way
But-
from
But it'd be
Newport
closer
Ridge.
if we had BRT.
Yeah.
What's a long way?
Right?
You know.
Can you get the
Close for
BRT
you.
running by then?
Yes, we will do our best.
I'd like to go back to the question about the reporting. The board meeting is on Friday. I had one window of opportunity to go see my son and family in Washington DC, and it's on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So I will not be able to do that. I asked our vice chair if he would be able to do that.
I can. PT.
And so we can give a report, a written report, or we could delay the report until the board's September meeting. Karen said that she might be able to come back if the report can be given at the end of the board meeting.
Yeah. I don't know what the agenda looks like. It was probably something I should have done while I was sitting here.
Yeah, it generally is at the beginning of the
Right.
board meeting. Unless somebody else is, I don't see anybody else.
And that board
stepping
meeting
up.
is
Friday.
tomorrow
Friday.
Friday, or a week
It-
from Friday?
It's Friday.
Friday, this Friday.
This
the
Friday.
20th.
It's at 10 o'clock, not 9:30, because they have two other meetings before it.
Yeah, they have-
8:30
Oh.
and 9:30.
It's the 24th.
Be able to make that.
Okay, is it Is it acceptable for the committee if Karen represents us at that
Do you
time?
need a motion, even though we can't vote, or consensus? I think it's.
Well, if it's without objection, we'll do that. I do have an outline that I usually follow for that, and then I'll share with Karen.
Okay.
I think we had 2 items to carry forward. One was the recommendation relative to SunTrax.
Right.
It would be transit-oriented, and that be done as soon as incorporated right now.
Right.
And then the other one was the relative to BRT to ask for at least the calculation of what it would take to get to a gold standard. Is that correct?
I think that's correct, but I think the partnership has asked us to recommend to the TBARTA board that we support the gold standard. And I think that there's a consensus that we do, subject to cost. Does that help you, David?
I think that's helpful to the project, yes.
Okay.
And I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it is, I think that's the question, right, is,
Yep.
I think we would all support a gold standard but there is trade-offs, and I think the station locations, as you said, and we talked today, is gonna be the big ask. And so if you run into something, well, where do we trade off then if it's mitigate, so, yeah, I agree.
Well, the location and the design of the station.
Correct.
Because of-
Well, and acquisition possibility, but, yeah, that's the.
Okay. Is there anything else to come to the committee at this time?
I just have one announcement. Mr. Chairman, I just want to make the committee aware that, as you probably all know, the legislature approved the study of 3 new tollways throughout the state. The FDOT has appointed task forces to make recommendations on the details of each of those 3 roadways. Those 3 task forces are all meeting in Tampa next week, the 27th, on Tuesday, at the Tampa Convention Center, pretty much all day. I haven't seen an agenda, so I don't know how they're actually going to format that, but I wanted to bring it to this committee's attention because particularly the Central Florida Connector, or whatever it ends up being called, is pretty close to us, and the extension of the Suncoast all the way to Georgia, I think should be of interest to TBARTA. Tuesday, Tampa Convention Center, starting at 8 o'clock.
Okay. Anything else? All right. We are adjourned. Karen,
I'll
you
stay.
can hang around just for a few minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for keeping us on task.
Nice job.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, you have to take another get on the.
I see all that stuff. That's good.
Yeah.
There'll be signs.
There'll be signs.
There'll be signs.
This thing was.
The Charlie View,
Car
is
one.
it the library?
Oh, God.
Yeah.
On the library.
Oh, thank you for, it was a pleasure. I mean, all 11 people are not really relatives, you know? Great, thank you.
All right.
Still there, Michael?
And then I'm going to that other one after that, yes. Okay, see you there. Bye.
Yeah. Make us proud.
Oh, yeah.
No, I get it.
You'll do a good job. Okay.
Have a good one. I'll see you guys in a couple
All
of
righty.
months.
Bill, have a nice, safe trip.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay.
Yeah.
being here from Brooklyn.
So give me the two.
Good seeing you. Good seeing you.
Two items. that-
Couple months. Bill, good, yeah, good, sorry I missed last time.
Okay, what I've
And
done,
I'm coming back from Europe next time, so it's gonna be.
Yeah, I do. Here.
this
And I
Scott
actually,
Locklear, I don't know if you've ever met.
so many times, I have it in my desk.
This is the
It might be good,
report.
you know, I'm building next year, maybe just grab a cup of coffee.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
This is the
Yeah,
report.
we need bombers on guide if we have those.
There you go.
Yes, I'd like to, I mean, I know a little bit about.
Thank you.
Park.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And so
I know a
I
little bit about
put
it.
together an outline. Follow here.
Follow up with the-
We met on August 21st.
Good.
So.
Yeah, we're moving out. I appreciate the questions, thank you.
Tomorrow or Monday?
I want to get your answers.
Yeah. Thanks.
Where there was a bathroom.
Monday's the 26th.
I guess. Take care. See you. Come around. See you. Are you there Friday?
I could do.
Action items, right?
So, you would,
Let's grab some coffee. Coffee, and I don't like the coffee we have in the office. It's even worse, I make it.
Oh, my God. Yeah, okay.
West Shore good?
project.
Yeah, that's what.
And the,
I figured you'd like run out of town on a rail if you said, no, West Shore, no.
Yeah.
I'll just put TBD in here. I'll pick one Starbucks or the other.
Okay, or open air, or even Metro Diner. I'm going to Metro Diner for lunch.
They have a good cup of coffee there?
Yeah.
Let's just do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I go there for lunch and
Have
a
you?
cup of coffee.
A good breakfast with.
Dave Silver's Bill Roberts, Metro Diner, 26 p.m.
Yeah.
Ed. Go ahead, there's something open here.
Yeah.
No, this is not the final call for participation for the regional competitiveness report. That's what I get by.
we said the transit technologies be an integral part of
There we go.
the Suntrack.
All right, great.
Yes,
Yeah, and Dave, only if
including
this is
first and last mile.
convenient and something you don't want to do. You just got some broad.
No, I need.
Want to kick around.
I think I'd very much benefit from a download. Hey, thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, thank you.
The prep session.
Yeah. I drafted something regarding the BRT standard. And
We need your help, Bill.
No, you don't. Bill's got it.
For me. Get rid of my potty mouth. Oh, yeah. Okay.
scratch. I can send this document to you. but,
Oh, yeah, that would be great.
Then
Part of Sun Tracks include,
first and last mile.
okay.
I'm gonna head out unless you need me for anything.
Oh, no, you're good, Brian, thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you wanna send it to me, that'd be great. I think you have to send it through,
I'll copy one.
right. Okay.
Do you think it would be helpful for this committee to hear a brief summary about what happened at the preceding TBARTA board meetings? What actions, if any, or presentations? were made?
Yes, that was something that we stipulated at our MPOs, just to give us a flavor for what they're looking for and their direction. Yeah, we don't have that, I think we're missing that.
I'm going to put that down as something we'll talk about, for the entire committee to talk about.
Yeah,
Okay.
that would be
What's
great.
your thought on it? Do you think it would be?
Oh, no, I think it would be beneficial.
I go to some of those meetings, and quite frankly, they don't get much accomplished at some of them.
No,
I know.
So,
Well,
Whining
and I'm not suggesting that it would be something you would do. I mean, it would be something maybe standard.
yeah,
well, or include the minutes from the meeting.
And our MPO does that.
yeah, we do. Yeah, no, that'd be beneficial, thank you.
Back across the bridge.
Time to go.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, good seeing you again.
Yeah.
All right, you know what? If you feel comfortable sending this to me, but I can probably type it up. It wouldn't take me very long. Do you want this back?
No, I don't need that back.
Okay.
I kept a
All right.
copy of it for me. That might be best, because I'm going from here to a 4:30 meeting to a 7:30
Yeah.
meeting. And then I'm getting up tomorrow morning for a 6:50 flight. so-
Nice.
But if I think about it, I'll send it to you.
All right, thank you, Bill.
Yes.
Have a safe trip. I love DC. Not this time of year, but I do love DC.
Yeah, it's a little warm.
Have a good one. Thank
Okay.
you.
Hi, I'm Jay Farner, CEO of Quicken Loans. 30% of Americans who are planning home improvements apply.
There you go. Just did.
Okay.